Okay, hi everybody. I know some people are still waiting to grab a glass and a plate, but we're going to get started because it's pretty informal this evening and I don't want to keep you too long from the cake, which will be cut in a while. So, for anyone who's joined us this evening and hasn't been here during the week and hasn't met me, I'm Eleanor. I'm the Director of the Centre for Disability Law and Policy here at NUI Galway, and together with my colleague Lara, we're co-directing this year's 10th International Disability Law Summer School. I just want to say a few words about summer school before we do a sort of a hit list of our top facts about what's changed in the world since we started the summer school. It's really impressive, I think, that we've arrived at 10 of these summer schools. I've actually only been here for 8 of them, but Charles, who you'll hear from later, I believe has been here for all 10, which is very impressive. And I remember when we started out, it was like maybe 20 people in the Ars Maiola, and we've gone from that small group to over 200 in our new dedicated Institute for Life Course and Society. Yay! So I think so many great things happen every year at summer school. I said at the beginning of the week that it's one of my favorite times of the year when I get to see so many people from all parts of the world that come together in this small, remote space on the west coast of the edge of Europe. And I think that there are a lot of, to use an Oprah Winfrey term, aha moments that happen at summer school. When things just click and things you've been thinking about for a long time start to make sense, or you become convinced of something that you weren't sure about before because you hear so many people passionately defend an argument. And then we get that Galway magic like today when the sun finally shines and everyone's already in a better mood and more energized and ready to go forth and make change. I'm really pleased that over the years we've seen so many participants from the summer school come back, not only to be members of the faculty at summer school, but also to go on to further study, often with us in Galway too, which is great, to our LLM programme, to our PhD programme, to come back to work with us as researchers, like Lara, and then go on to do amazing things in their careers, as Lara and others are doing, and to make real change in their countries around the world. So, like I said, so much has changed in the world since we started the summer school that we thought we would give you our top facts about things that have happened. And Elizabeth Egan, who joins us from Northeastern Law School, has done amazing work putting together this presentation. There's a lot of detail in it, and you'll be pleased to hear we're not going to talk you through the entire presentation. So we're just going to give you our highlights, and maybe you will have new and different ones that you want to add and share throughout the evening of the things that have really changed the landscape of disability rights since we started the summer school so many years ago. So over to you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Eleanor. Okay, so I'm going to start off by sharing, I think, one of the most visible ways you can see the progress, which is ratification of the CRPD. So 161 parties have signed the CRPD and 177 parties have ratified. You can zoom in on a map so you can see the breakdown there. And for the optional protocol, there are 92 signatories to the optional protocol and 92 ratifications. So you can see the breakdown there also. And we'd also like to talk about the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And we are lucky enough to have had many members attend summer school. So some of the current members who have attended summer school are here. On this slide, we have Ahmed, Teresia, and Samuel. And we also have former and future members in attendance, including Gabor, Maria, and Rosemary. And also want to talk about the individual complaints that have been brought before the committee, which is another way we can track the progress that has been made. So as of June 2017, there are 22 pending cases before the committee, and of the 16 resolved cases, there have been 8 findings of violations, so that's 50%. And I will pass it back to Eleanor and Laura now.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So another thing that changed since Jared and Theresia's seminal report on the lack of disability visibility in the Human Rights Treaty body system is that since we've had the UN Convention, we now see many more treaty bodies actually talking about disability in their concluding observations. So this article that Michael Stein wrote with another colleague talks about how we can track the changes there, and you see that before the convention, there was less than 20% of concluding observations from treaty bodies that had any reference to disability and the human rights of people with disabilities. And since we've had a convention, this figure has risen to 62%. So that's a dramatic increase in the visibility of disability within the human rights treaty body system. I also want to talk about some changes. So not just in the international system, but also in the domestic system of our countries and their legal frameworks. We've seen constitutional change in many countries to explicitly recognize the rights of persons with disabilities. And some examples of constitutional change include Turkey, Tunisia, and Ecuador, who have changed their constitutions to recognize the rights of people with disabilities since we've had a convention and since we've had the summer school. I don't suggest they're necessarily connected, but I think it's important to think about the progress. There's also several examples of countries that have introduced comprehensive legislation to integrate, to domesticate the convention or to reflect the broad sweep of rights of persons with disabilities. And just some of the examples that Elizabeth found in her research include legislative acts in Mexico, in Peru, in Slovenia, in Montenegro, in Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Senegal, and India. I'm sure there are many more that those of you here would like to share with us about that, but I think it's really important to see those changes at the grassroots level and in the domestic legal frameworks. So I'm going to hand to Laura now to talk about some final changes in the academic space and also in the political space.
Thank you, and thank you, Elizabeth, to do this magnificent presentation. So one of the things I think that the CRPD and the different ratifications in different countries made was the visibility of people with disabilities and also the participation on the political environment. So we have, in the European region, we have Ángela Bachiller. This is the Argentinian pronunciation. In Spain will be some kind of Ángela Bachiller that I cannot say very well. Okay, so she's in the local government on Spain. And then we have a parliament senator, Tammy, I'm sorry, I cannot, where is it there? This is in the US. Tammy Duckworth, if I say correctly, in the United States. And then also a minister on Malawi, in the African region. There, Rachel, I'm sorry, I'm sure I will say this wrong. Cachaje, maybe, and the president of Ecuador, Lenin Moreno. So, if I say, yeah. So, I want to say something in this slide. If you, it's true that, I mean, on one side we have the CRPD and all the work of the committee and all the work of the organizations that made visible persons with disabilities in the political environment, but sometimes I'm from Argentina, and our vice president is a woman with disabilities, and I have to say, and I have to acknowledge that she didn't do so many things for people with disabilities. So also we have to, the TPOs in the civil society, we have to push there to, I don't know, to recognize them as a person with disability. But the identity is very personal and it's very complex, but also the CRPD allow them to make them more visible, but also they have to do more. Yeah, they're in a privileged position. So then we have different networks around the world regarding in academia, and we want to highlight the Disability Rights and Law Schools project in Africa, that here is in Esencia, is over there. If you want to know more about this network, you can talk to her and she will explain what it's about, and I'm sure she will be very happy to receive more context. And finally, we want to highlight that in several countries we have 13, but I'm sure that there are more. They had judgments on relying on the CRPD, and I think this is very important because it's not just the law, but also the people who apply the law that made, understand the CRPD, even if they come from a very archaic system of justice. So I think that is very, very, very important, and we want to highlight it.
So those are just some of our highlights, but I'm sure you have many more that you can share. Think about all the things that are different maybe when you started working in this field to now. And for those of you who are regular attendees at summer school, or even here for the first time, think about maybe what will happen, what will have you heard this week that will help you create change in your own context. So with that in mind, I think we're going to move to the next session, and I'll have, Lara, do you want to introduce?
We'll have a conversation that will be moderated by Charles O'Mahony, the head of School of Law here at NYG. The conversation will be an informal conversation just to you to know more about the summer school with, very, very important participants and the ones that are organizing through all this year the summer school. I'm talking about Gerard Quinn, the former director of the CDLP, Rosemary Keys, Amit Janda, and oh, that's it. Oh, okay. Okay, so you have the floor, and Charles, I don't know where are you? Okay, there.
Hello everybody, I'm Charles O'Mahony. I'm the head of the School of Law here at NUI Galway. Have you ever heard of the boy band called the Clancy Brothers? No. They were a very famous Irish band in the 1960s, and they had a song called The Moonshiner, and the song went along the lines of, I'm a rambler, I'm a gambler, I'm a long way from home, and if you don't like me, then leave me alone. I'll eat when I'm hungry, I'll drink when I'm dry, and if the moonshine don't kill me, I live till I die. So if you're feeling hungry or you're feeling dry, help yourself to some refreshments at the back and to some wine. So feel free to get up and do that if you want to eat something or if you want to drink something. Okay, so I've been asked to facilitate a conversation between three of the people that have been very much involved with the summer school over the past 10 years and longer. Professor Gerard Quinn, the founder of the Centre for Disability Law and Policy, and who's directed many of the summer schools. Professor Amit Janda from the University of Hyderabad, from Nasdar in Hyderabad in India, and Rosemary Keys, who is very much involved in drafting of the convention and who has spoken at most of the summer schools. So I've been given a number of questions, and I am going to go through them. Hopefully it will take no longer than 20 to 25 minutes, and just really to, I suppose, get the reflections of our three panellists in relation to the summer school. So I'll start off perhaps with Gerard, and the first question I have been asked to ask has been to ask our panellists to share a fun fact or story that they have about themselves or about the summer schools that they have attended.
Okay, I didn't expect that.
I just want to know who our friend is.
Yeah. The empty seat.
The empty seat.
There's been lots of hilarious moments. One of the best was when we invited Martin Nocton, and I'm delighted to acknowledge Martin's sister here in the audience, Barbara. Martin was an amazing advocate here in Ireland. We invited him to chair one of our moot court competitions. We had drafted rather elaborate rules of practice and procedure. And of course, the talking was confined to the civil society lawyers and the government lawyers. But somebody stood up in the middle and said, they're absolutely wrong, that's a crap argument, and I'll tell you why. And then there were immediate objections from one of the sides in the moot court, and Martin overruled them completely. So this Belgian advocate took over the moot court competition, and it was absolutely fascinating. The place was in bedlam because nobody knew what was going on, but I think Martin had an idea what he was doing, and that was absolutely hilarious.
Well, I think for me it was I don't know whether it was the first keynote I did at the summer school, but it was like the keynote is supposed to be starting the day, but I ended the day with the keynote because my flights, I was sent back because I didn't have a UK visa and I couldn't possibly come through London without a visa. And it's after that they changed it, but I decided to boycott London. So that for me was like a working back on trying to create a keynote after the fact. Yeah.
I suppose for me it's been a case of rocking up to the summer school. So I arrive first thing Monday morning and Eleanor goes, "Rosemary, you're here. Fabulous." I said, "Yeah, aren't I supposed to be?" "Yeah, but Charlotte's not, Janet's not. So, can you cover Charlotte, can you cover Janet? And somebody else isn't coming in tomorrow morning, so could you chair this? And also, could you join the panel on?" And Cormac and I become great friends. He's got to mic me up about 7 times per day. So yeah, that's probably my fondest memory. All right, my most enduring memory of the summer school. But yeah, I'm nothing if I'm not flexible. And the summer school is nothing if it's not flexible.
Would you like to hear a fun fact about Jared? Yeah, Jared is an award-winning accordion player. And sometime, maybe tomorrow, Jared, you might play the accordion for us.
It's going to be really useful on a road trip in Australia.
Next year. Okay. The next question is, where did the idea for the summer school come from?
Yeah, it was the early 2000s. There was a lot happening, particularly in the European Union. And a lot of us were very frustrated that people on the ground, advocates, lawyers, and indeed government policy people didn't really get it, and it wasn't reaching out to them. So I was in the back of a minivan in Brussels with 2 officials from the European Commission, and I happened to say to them, wouldn't it be a good idea if we put something together like a summer school and then democratize the ideas by videoing it and putting it on the net so that others could watch in later? And they instantly, both of them turned around to me. Now, this wasn't while they were driving, I hesitate to say. And they said, well, send us a proposal. And I did. And I think the moral of the story is, if it comes to the risk of sticking your neck out or waiting, stick your bloody neck out, because they actually funded it. They were nudged into a space whereby they were encouraged to include more international dimensions, which was to their credit. But then after that funding run out, then we were very lucky to get funding from Atlantic Philanthropies, as well as laterally from the Open Society Foundation and 1 or 2 others, and gradually it morphed into a much more international event. But I have to say, at the back of that car in the early 2000s, I had absolutely no idea, no plan as to how it would, evolve into something quite different. So, yeah, take a risk. Always take a risk.
The next question I have then is, how and why has the shape and content of the summer schools changed over the last 10 years or so?
I'll start that off, but it's very simple. It began right about the time the convention was concluding the negotiations. So slowly but surely the convention took over in terms of imperatives, priorities, and we've kind of ducked and weaved between various thematic priorities And one of the surprises of drafting the convention is that we all thought it would be an orthodox, not you, an orthodox lawyer's equal opportunities tract. But it actually transformed itself into something quite different, because I think we all collectively arrived at the conclusion that the reason why we had to have an equal opportunities approach is because people with disabilities are just not visible as persons. And I think that's why the whole personhood, community living dimension really took off as dominant themes.
I would somewhere add to that and say that possibly because of the CRPD being a driving force and the fact of the participation, or like say the participation of the primary stakeholder, was a very integral part of how the CRPD got negotiated. I think a lot of that resonated in how the summer school got organized. So you would find that large number of scholars with disabilities, persons with disabilities with experiential knowledge, people with disabilities from all parts of the world. So it became that whole equity component, I think, became for me the subliminal logic of the summer school. Not just as people who came in as participants, that was of course there, people who came in as resource people, and this interchangeability between you being a resource person or you being a participant. It was not like you were necessarily on one side. It was a continuous kind of dialogue, and you knew that the people sitting in the audience were not quote-unquote students. They were people who came with their own body of knowledge and had as much to contribute to the whole question of knowledge creation. And I think this is something which one took from the CRPD, because ordinarily international conventions have been negotiations between state parties. The CRPD was somewhere saying is that people who are going to be the beneficiaries of a particular convention have to be having a primary voice. I think in some manner, I wouldn't say all the time, but in some manner that resonance, that it's not only a resource person driven knowledge, it's an exchange between people. That for me is a very significant kind of evolution which has, and I think with the whole business of having directors and co-directors who were going to be curating the convention, the summer school in different kinds of ways, it went a further step, so to say.
I'm responsible for nothing. I curated nothing, but I always have an opinion. For me, the last presentation shows why the summer school has changed. And I mean, my learned colleagues will change because that map changed. The number of countries, the number of representations, the number of individual communications to the treaty body, the fact that there was a treaty body, it changed, it grew, the dynamics became completely different. It touched many more people's lives. So many more people were interested, and hence we've gone from, drafty lecture theatres to packed lecture theatres to the impressive crowd and the impressive people that we have before us today, and we will have before us again next year.
Thank you very much. My next question is for Gerard, really, and the question is, Gerard, how were the different themes for the summer school selected? Why were they selected? What was the thought around it in terms of selecting those themes over the last 10 years?
Yeah, I think the penny dropped, and a lot of the deep personhood issues were rising to the surface in terms of the kind of general comments the committee was drafting, in terms of the advocacy from the community, and it was pretty clear that people were eager to do a deep dive into these issues. And I also think the convention doesn't give you clear right and wrong answers. I think it's misguided to view it like that. It just creates a new space animated by the right kinds of values, whereby we struggle through to get the answers for ourselves. And there, I think, the arrogance of academia has to be put in a box, because it's all right, really about respecting the knowledge of the community and trying to empower people to come forward themselves, not just with critiques about what's wrong in their own country, because believe it or not, most public servants know that, but with solutions, with blueprints for change, with law reform models, and so on and so forth. So first tranche, I guess, and kind of the latter period of the summer school is really personhood issues. We all have pet topics. One of mine at the moment is prisoners with disabilities right throughout the world. So what happens next year, I'm not sure. We always asked people on the evaluation forms, what do they think should be covered next year? And we paid a lot of attention to that.
So my follow-on question for that for all three panelists is, what would you like to see as themes for maybe next year or the coming years for the summer schools that are to be? Amita.
Because I've laughed. I would say disability humor. I think I would just go with the point which Gerard was making. It's not because it comes in from what the participants want or what the constituency requires. I wouldn't want to sort of anticipate it. And I would think this kind of an open-mindedness is an important, because if you've already made up your mind, then nothing else really appeals. But if you're saying that let's look for what is exciting and proceed on that basis, I also genuinely do think that the point I was making in terms of humor, in terms of, you know, like having other sessions which allow for a little less learnedness and little more fun. Because I genuinely do think that that which you do with fun, you internalize more and you loosen up more, and I think it's important that a space which has experimented as much as it has, shouldn't just think in terms of what it will do, but also how it will do what it will do.
It's very rare when I'm up on a podium that I agree with Jared. He generally throws Cicero at me. I'm absolutely buggered. I've got nothing to say in response. But this time he said something that resonates, because prisons and the law and the justice system and the overrepresentation of people with disability in the justice system, both within civil and criminal, is, I know this is really a lame pun and I don't mean it, but it's really criminal. And I think that's because CRPD challenges the bulk of all our knowledge, all us lawyers, what underpins our legal system. And it's the ascension, now I can't even say it. Give a girl one glass of red wine and she can't speak. Excuse me. The essentialism within our legal system of the reasonable person, of the sound mind. CRPD challenges it, and our legal systems don't know how to respond. And I think it's the greatest challenge of CRPD. It permeates through everything but prisons and the justice system. We had at the Conference of States Parties just previously last week in New York, a side event run by First Peoples Disability Network from Australia. Sit down, Frances, calm down, girl. And it was standing room only. Like, people could not get in the room. They were standing outside waiting to hear what happened. And so, hey, I'm on a podium and I agree with Jared. I think prisons and the criminal justice system is very ripe for examination.
Could I just add to that and throw another spanner in the works? And it's it's bloody obvious. The amount of people with disabilities caught up in conflicts today is incredible. And a lot of work needs to be done on bringing the laws of war much closer to the UN CRPD, in as much as you can do so in the fog of war. But there's certainly a lot that needs to be done there. And the good sign is there are a lot of militaries around the world who are paying attention to this. Not that I'm into militarism, of course, but I think it's, you can just see what's happening in Syria and so forth.
I know you're all very tired after a very long week and a lot of international travel. So this is the last question I'm going to ask the panel. And that is, what is your big memory or your big two memories of the different summer schools that you've been involved with?
I think for me, the looking back panel we did last year. That one. Memory. we were like people who were involved in the drafting of the CRPD, and it was us looking back on like how do we see it today. And I think it is for me one of my very abiding memories. The other was what else? I think one is enough, no?
It is.
The other was the poster competition you made me judge. It was horrible. I died. And of course, as a moot judge with a real sitting judge, that was fun.
Thank you.
So I gave you 3, in fact.
Thank you very much. Rosemary?
I suppose the top one's going to be shamed into singing Waltzing Matilda at the barbecue. Anyone that knows me knows that I can't sing to save myself. But I think, it's no one particular moment. I suppose it's the growth in the numbers, it's the growth in the passion, and it's the growth in the knowledge, and that's a good thing. I don't come here expecting you all to be my mini master's students that I teach back in Sydney. I come here and the growth and the passion and the knowledge is because the knowledge comes to me as much as I hope I give you knowledge, and I truly enjoy it. I mean, Jesus, it's a long way away. I keep coming back for something. It's not because it's just round the corner. And it's not for the weather. So, you guys give me as much as, many times more than what I can give you, and I think it's that shared experience it's really the memory for me.
So, I think it's the conversations people have, because I try to listen in sometimes, and it's just amazing conversations that I always learn so much from, because you can see ideas turning in people's minds and new windows opening up, and that's education. Education is not really about knowledge. It's really about planting a spark. So that's, and of course, Rosemary singing Waltzing Matilda. I'd have to say Slim Dusty has a rival there.
The man's dead.
I know, poor guy. So it's an unfair competition. The other highlight for me was to have the President of Ireland open up one of our summer schools. And then I said, wow, we really have arrived in that people are taking seriously these ideas. Now, he's not in the executive branch of government, but nevertheless, it was of real symbolic importance that he would have been at that. And there were 2 or 3 other things that are highly embarrassing on my part that I can't reveal, but they are also my high points. Maybe in the bar later on.
Thanks very much. I'd like to share one of my main memories of the summer schools, and that's actually all the people I've met over the years, all of the master's students, all of the PhD students, all of my colleagues from the School of Law, and lots of different volunteers who helped us really run the summer schools. So probably hundreds of people at this point, and to really thank them really for all their help and support with the summer schools, because it really wouldn't be possible without them. So I'd like to thank our 3 panellists for their very interesting contributions, and perhaps give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand you back over to Dr. Laura Maria Serra.
Thank you, Charles. Okay, so now we are going to present, we're going to screen actually a short movie called Silent Moves. Sorry, I have the name of the director here. They're actors, they're national actors from Ireland, actors with disability, and the director is Aideen Berry, and actually she's here based on the NYG, so it's all inside house. So I don't know how this works. managers. Okay, so thank you everybody. I hope there that enjoyed the movie. And now I will give the floor to Professor Jared Quinn to present our first edition on the Global Disability Activism Award from the CDLP. So Jared, if you can join us.
So, Gabor, where are you? Please join me. So this is the first award that the Centre is making on global advocacy, and it's in honor of Martin Naughton, who was quite an amazing advocate in this country. We have a portrait of Martin over here. Unfortunately, he passed away maybe about a year ago. And again, we're very proud to have his sister Barbara in the audience. So I put together something in honor of Gabor, and here goes. When we recall a person's life and labor, the tendency is often to recall every single event, every contribution, every outward manifestation of the self. I'm going to resist doing that. For one thing, the list of your accomplishments is just too long. And for another, it's all on the public record. So instead, I'll try to convey to you, to capture for you, a sense of Gabor the man, the human being, the person behind a magnificent life history. Gabor came into the world in a Hungary entombed behind the Iron Curtain. Like all such orbits based on sheer naked power, he typically saw beyond it and experienced and felt the human side of a culture that is much wider, much deeper, and indeed much more cultured than its outward appearance. You get the sense that Gabor is not really interested in outward appearances. Gabor could always see beyond these appearances. He always saw the light behind the darkness, and he saw and he sees the light in unusual ways and places. I can do no better than to quote one of his favorite authors, Anton Chekhov, who said, "Don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass." Gabor finds humanity deep in broken places. No doubt his sensitivity to the wonderful light of life comes to him through the ages and especially from his beloved mother. He remembers and feels through the prism of her love, and this love touches and sustains him to this day. One might even say that his life was and is a life of love, a life of seeing beyond oneself, of facing the truth, and of giving of himself so that others could live better. The irrationality and even the brutality of early life behind the Iron Curtain did not blind him to the richness of Russian culture and the throb of humanity that beats within its people. A physicist by training, he was naturally drawn even closer to the Russian orbit, with a famous and I would say highly instructive stay in St. Petersburg at one point in time in his career. Physics, I think, gave him an unerring eye for illogicality, for arguments that fail to argue, for conclusions that betray the suppositions of their authors rather than hard evidence. And this was especially useful to him later in life in a field like mental health that is famously bedeviled by illogicality and supposition, not to mention superstition. And physics exposed him to seeing the truth through different frameworks. Frameworks of reference change just as much in physics as they do in social policy. He was comfortable with this long before we spoke about the march from the medical model to the social model to the human rights model, And I think his training in physics prepared him to actually grasp and run with this transition of paradigms. I feel Gabor picked something else up from his Russian experience. Gabor is a man, like Russians, who feels life with all his senses. Like many of Chekhov's characters, he feels things. Before anyone can fully parse a situation, he has already intuited it. Before anyone can understand how victims feel, he feels it. And before the counter-arguments are made, he understands them, knows where they're coming from, and has the riposte already scripted. Something else. Maybe it was from his family, maybe it was from his Russian formation, but he instinctively knew that direct attacks were unlikely to yield direct results. That is to say, he has a highly sophisticated sense of the psychology of change, of the need to nuance argument so that the champions of the established order begin to question their own beliefs for themselves. I've seen him doing this to great effect in many different fora, and it's a real joy to behold. Solid defenders of the status quo walking away after an encounter with Gabor, questioning themselves, and ultimately arriving at their own conclusions for themselves. Francois Mitterrand, and I love this, was asked once he met Margaret Thatcher first, what did he think? And he said, "She may have the lips of Marilyn Monroe, but she also has the eyes of Caligula." This is true. This is what Mitterrand said. And it could easily just be said of Gabor that while he has the sweetness of Mr. Rogers, he also has the persuasive power of Cicero. All this and more was on vivid display during the drafting of the UN treaty. Coming as a survivor from the survivor community and knowing full well the sheer power of traditional thinking backed by very powerful vested interests, he knew how to weave an argument, to knit people together under a powerful and actually very optimistic narrative. I experienced Gabor in action first when I sat on a government delegation at the outset of the drafting of the treaty. It's not the normatariat, people who cleave to absolutes and who provide simplistic or formulaic answers, who make the world go around. No, it's people like Gabor who have the credibility that comes to them from life experience. It's people like Gabor who can get a new idea over the line. It's people like Gabor who won't make false claims, but will take the time to bring people with him. And here's why that works. Most public servants already know what's wrong. They don't need to be normatively flogged to death. They need to be made comfortable taking a risk, entering a new space, and even discovering something new about themselves. The psychology of change is very important, and Gabor is past master at that. Some people leave behind houses or wealth or other tangible forms of personal property. Few of us leave ideas that transform lives and that constantly unfurl themselves through time to reveal a completely different way of being with new policies and law, very much like a resplendent rose with the passage of time. That's what Gabor did. Ideas are very strange things. They paint new ground, they inform and change the range of the possible, they nudge people to a different way of looking at the world, and they make what was once impossible seem eminently possible. It's poetry in motion, and Gabor's life was and is poetry in motion. Articles 12 and 14, autonomy and liberty, are like the Aladdin's cave of ideas that keeps on giving. They are a carrier for a new view of humanity and personhood. Slowly but surely, the world is coming around. Who could have done anything like this? Maybe Thomas Jefferson, in the magisterial words of the Declaration of Independence. Maybe Gandhi, who preached nonviolent resistance. Maybe Solzhenitsyn, through his cultured pen, ripped apart the brutality of one regime and surely hastened its collapse. Gabor, I would say the changes you helped to usher in are no less profound or revolutionary than the changes they ushered in. You did it, of course, with others. Your partner, not in crime, your partner in positive change, Amita Danda, is also here with us tonight. You've heard her earlier on. Tonight, I think, is all the more special for her presence. Your duet, Gabor and Amita, at the UN was really a joy to behold. I don't think I exaggerate when I think I say your true spiritual home is India. You are in very good company because your fellow Hungarian countryman, Sandor Karosi Soma, I'm sure my translation is terrible, is revered in India. You two brought the best part of your culture to India, and you more than fill his shoes. And after the drafting of the treaty, you went on to serve on the UN committee. On it, you became a shepherd for the ideas that gave birth to the treaty. In fact, you co-chaired the original working group on legal capacity within the committee. You did amazing work on the ground in Hungary with Voices of Soul and other groups. How really typical of you that you would call it Voices of Soul. You gave countless and inspiring talks here at our summer school. By the way, and I think you will agree with me, Gabor, I personally hate the idea of having prefabricated learning outcomes for students in education. The truth is we simply never know what seed we plant, how it grows, or even when it will sprout in the future. Nor should we pretend to know. And that's the true beauty of education. I've seen many people walk away after listening to you enthralled by new possibilities they had never even dreamt about before. Many of them have become important agents of change in the wider community. That's important. But the fact that you could reach their souls and liberate something in them and enable them to give themselves permission to think differently, I think, is ultimately more important to you and indeed for them. Your many appearances at public events and conferences here in Ireland on the reform of our totally outdated legal capacity law was hugely instrumental in bringing about change. You played no small part in helping us enact Europe's first supported decision-making law. It's not perfect, nothing ever is, but the really amazing thing about you is you embrace imperfection. And in this, you truly know the human condition. And you also have faith that the ideas will eventually triumph. In this, I think your worldview is, if I may say so, very Hegelian. An ether of pure ideas based on the best angels of our humanity working themselves pure through a very imperfect world. As Solzhenitsyn would have said, the battlefield between good and evil runs through the heart of every man and woman. You've had many trials and tribulations, but you always learn. You're constantly in learning mode, and especially self-learning mode. We all love and admire you for this. Gabor, I shared some ideas with a bunch of friends, and some of the reactions were just beautiful. Let me read you one. You know, it was Gabor that brought me into the movement. I was in my last year of law school, and he came to Washington to present as part of a panel of human rights defenders highlighted in Kerry Kennedy Como's book, Speak Truth to Power. I was a closeted user and survivor, masquerading as a third-year law student, and hearing him speak changed my life. For the first time, I saw someone with a major psychiatric diagnosis, who nevertheless was open about his experience. Before meeting Gabor, I had no role models. I did not know a single person diagnosed with a major mental illness who was functioning in the world. Gabor gave me hope that I might be able to make contributions, that my life could be more than the prognosis I'd been given, of lifelong medication management and low expectations. Over the past 2 decades, Gabor has continued to be a role model and a mentor. And some of my fondest memories, sorry, my eyesight isn't great, of when I've been able to collaborate, with him. Please send my fondest regards. I won't name the name, but I think you know who it is. Gabor, to touch lives like this is sheer magic. Now, I'm not known for my love of poetry, but I say again, your life is one of poetry in motion, and I end with one poem that I really do like, written by Aeschylus over 2,000 years ago, in the great flowering of humanity in ancient Greece. He speaks to the peace that can only come through pain, and even then at a far remove from the cause of that pain. It goes, "He who learns must suffer. Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." Gabor, you've turned pain into wisdom, and countless generations of persons with disabilities not yet born will thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, to those of you who knew and loved and even adored Martin Naughton as I did, I give you Gabor Gambos, a truly worthy first recipient of this prize. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerard, and thank you all of you who are here today and who are not here, but who are happy about this award. But what can I say? I am moved, that is what I know. And it is a really strange feeling, you know, when you listen to a laudation about you, like what we heard from Gerard. I am mad. I am not that mad that I would literally believe every single word Gerard kindly told about me. But I think that the essence of what he said, I agree with the addition that, you know, I see that I possibly was the right person in some situations in the right time, and I did not overly abuse it. I tried to make use of it, not for myself, but for all of us. Just a few comments. The cake is waiting for us, I know. Learning, yes. I do not believe in teaching. I don't think you can teach anyone. But I genuinely believe in learning. We can learn and we cannot learn on our own. We need each other to learn. I think that what a teacher can do best, and that is what I saw in you, Gerard, is to create a learning environment which facilitates learning the best for all of us, not only for the students, but well, we are all students. There are no clear final answers to the important questions. We always need to learn and learn. The other thing about love, I have a very high appreciation for a famous English mathematician who was one of the greatest mathematicians of the 20th century, who also had an India connection. The mathematician was called Hardy, and basically he discovered the Indian genius Ramanujan. And he was a very strange man. And one of his postgrad students described his encounter with this Hardy, saying that Hardy no longer had undergraduate courses. He had a small class of 6 people for a special undergraduate class. And yet he prepared for all his classes, and he conducted the classes as if he had conducted, you know, a music concert or any artistic performance. And this young postgrad student felt that he would have liked to jump and hug this old, thin, vanishing professor, and he never did. And retrospectively, he was very sad that he never did, because he thought, you know, that how many opportunities we miss just because we simply fear to say that I love you, I appreciate you, I have very strong affections to you. And now I am trying to jump and hug you all, and Gerard especially, and tell you that I need you, I love you, and I think you also need me, and we really need each other, and it's not, you know, this Hollywoody pink something. We, people with disabilities in particular, I think, experience it on a daily basis, and there is nothing wrong with that. The very last thing I would like to share with you is that whenever you had a conflict between your head and your heart, then the lesson I learned is that go with your heart. Keep your mind open, give feedback, but let the driving force come from the heart. And the very last thing is, speak truth to power and act to power. And the trick, the secret, you know, I learned is, it's a very cheap excuse not acting and not speaking truth to power, is that I do not have a power. I'm a poor person, I am in a marginalized group of society, etc., etc. This is a lie, because the real power does not come from external things. It does not come from your constitution. It doesn't come from your skills. It comes from your lived truth. If you have a lived truth, then the power will come with it. Thank you very much.
So I actually completely forgot to give you the prize. So here's the